Hey, everybody, welcome to the June issue of Staffing Monthly. And I am really excited to introduce our guest that's going to give us an expert perspective on the state of staffing as it relates to mergers and acquisitions and really what's going on in the buying and selling of staffing agencies. And I'll tell you from my own perspective, it's one of the wonkiest times in M&A that I've ever seen. And I'm excited to have who I consider to be my go-to guy when it comes to M&A as far as looking for acquisitions. And I just want to tell you just a little bit about Brian Kennedy with R.A. Cohen Consulting, which is, in my opinion, and maybe even statistically true, probably the leading M&A firm for staffing agencies in the US, probably Canada as well. And I want to tell you a little bit about him and then have him tell you what he's doing now in the staffing industry and share with you what you can expect from the M&A side of this right now. And I've known Brian for a number of years. We've actually connected through Bob Cohen, who was really legend in this industry for a long time. And I've known Brian at a couple conferences, and he's helped us with some acquisitions. But what I've learned is he actually got started in the staffing game way back in 1981 as a full desk recruiter, and he really carved out a nice career in kind of the professional services, engineering, IT, working a desk, and for all different size companies, including 40 million in that range. So he's seen a lot. And 10 years or so ago, he was actually invited by Bob Cohen to join R.A. Cohen to get into the M&A side of things. And he's really carved out a nice role, has an amazing reputation, has helped numerous agencies kind of find the right buyer and find the right exit. And he's also helped a lot of numerous sellers that have actually been able to sell their agencies in a way that set up their retirement or their golden years. And that's something that's really important for those people that have not quite taken that on in their lives, is having someone by your side through that process, because most people only do that once. And having a trusted advisor along the way is key. And not only has he been the trusted advisor to, just buyers and sellers, he's actually sat on boards and helped lead entire associations for the staffing industry, to really be that trusted advisor and provide that guidance to those groups. So I'm excited to have Brian Kennedy here. Not only is he accomplished in the industry, but he's really is my go-to guy when it comes to acquisitions. I start every search with him, and he's helped guide us through a couple of successful ones. And yeah, Brian, glad to have you here, man. Great to connect.
Thanks, Dan. Nice to be here.
So if you could, I just want to start out with talk about what your role is in the staffing industry now. You're obviously connected in the M&A side of it, but let our audience know, what do you do on the daily? What is your role in this industry right now?
So we're a boutique firm established in '91, R.A. Cohen Consulting. It's myself and Sam Sacco now. Bob, a longtime friend, passed away about 10 years ago, just after he invited me over to the business. And he started the company in 1991 with a focus on providing M&A advice and support, facilitating transactions, predominantly focused on representing the seller back in 1991. And since then, we're just shy of 200 transactions that we've completed in the business. Sam and I have been running the business now for 10 years. It is a sell-side advisory for the most part. I think of our 198 or so transactions, we've maybe represented the buyer on 4 or 5 occasions only. So we don't call ourselves business brokers. Technically, our understanding is to call yourself a broker, you have to have a real estate license. And now more than ever, post-COVID, bricks and mortar are less of a component in most transactions anyways. Very few staffing M&A transactions include the sale of actual physical facilities. So we've never felt the need to do that. We call ourselves advisors. And basically, we work with sellers sometimes years in advance of them actually pulling the trigger and going to market. We try and engage people early so that they can get an understanding of what their business is worth today by providing, a sort of a free valuation and an analysis of their company, pointing out the things that they could do to build additional value over the short to mid run. And often, we'll foster those relationships over 3, 4, 5 years, and then the owner will finally come back and say, okay, now I'm ready, or now I know I'm going to get the number that I want, or now I'm really tired, just get me out of here. So a variety of answers, but it's really the end game is a focus on helping sellers or helping owners sell their businesses, and to get there we do a lot of consultation work along the way.
And I can be a testament to that. I know that you do a good job. I know we've worked on a number of deals where you've introduced me to, sellers, and you've told me, you've been pretty transparent in the process about, hey, we were going to bring them to market, but there were some things about the operation that we needed to optimize. And I know sometimes when your traditional broker does something like that, they're really just trying to eke out the few other cents. But what I've appreciated about the process with you and your transparency through it is it tends to be, hey, we did this so the seller can actually get more for their business, but it's rooted in the value that the business is going to be transferring to the buyer and the new owner. So I like that you do that sort of long tail advisory services to prepare your sellers for the market at the right time, because then you're going to have value that transfers over to the buyer and makes the deal less risky. And I've seen that firsthand, which I think is great.
Transparency is vital. Whatever we take to market and whatever we represent in the market, it has to be defendable. It's all going to be validated and verified and vetted through a due diligence process. So there's no point being anything but transparent up front. I'm not a fancy investment banker. I didn't work on Wall Street for years. I came from the industry. I was an owner operator. I sold 2 businesses. One of those sales was a dream and one was a nightmare. And when Bob invited me to come in 2012, I honestly thought maybe this is an opportunity for me to help some people avoid the nightmare, because selling your business is not easy. Choosing the right buyer is not easy. Choosing the right offer is not easy. So there's a lot that goes into what makes for a successful transaction at the end of the day, and they're not all successful. So I think transparency is absolutely essential for both sides going in. And I think if the buyer and the seller are put in a place where they are aiming for a win-win on all levels, I think that just makes for a better outcome for all involved.
I couldn't agree more. I really appreciate that. And that's another thing that I appreciate about what you bring is you're not a fancy investment banker, so when you're actually talking to potential buyers, like you can actually talk about the industry from the lens of someone that sat on a desk. And that's paramount, because if you don't really know this industry and you're just, I'm not trying to bag on other, investment bankers or brokers or anything like that. So don't take me the wrong way, but I just know from a buyer side, I find it more refreshing than dealing with someone that is just industry agnostic, that might just take a listing and then just kind of broadcast it out through your typical listing sites and whatnot. I know that's not what you do. I mean, you take an opportunity to cultivate sort of a buyer network, and you segment it based on who's the right buyer for certain, sellers. And I think that's a nice approach. And I like the fact you don't do anything else other than staffing, right? Like that's your deal.
I tell people, and I'm not really joking, I don't know much about anything other than staffing. We are 100% focused on the staffing industry and still learning all the time. This is an industry that in my 41 years continues to evolve. And in fact, the pace of that evolution seems to be increasing every year. So, it's what gets me up every day. It's what makes me come to work with, open ears and open eyes. So there's just so many opportunities to learn. And as you and I were talking about previously, it's a great place to be in terms of seeing how so many people, all in the same business, all doing virtually the same thing, all do it differently. And, there's not just one way to be great in this industry. There are many different ways to be great in this industry. And I'm in that fortunate vantage point where, I get an opportunity to, find out firsthand from different owners how they run their businesses. And it's been very rewarding.
I think it's amazing. And speaking to that about how this industry tends to evolve so much over time, sitting from your vantage point over the last 2 years of COVID and the pandemic, what do you think are the biggest things that have really changed in the staffing industry as a whole during that last 2 years?
Oh, I think there's probably, really 3 things, and not in any particular order, but certainly I think one that's forefront in so many people's minds is the whole remote work, the work from home, the work from anywhere phenomena. That's been a fundamental change. It's forced a lot of owners out of their comfort zones. A lot of owners work on the old school mentality that I have to see them to know that they're working. I have to see them sitting at their desk. And, newsflash, they were sitting at their desk for years and not necessarily working. So, this has been a big change. And I've been a strong proponent when I was in the business. We always had a fairly, I think, progressive mindset towards people working from home when it was warranted, when it was, when it was earned and when it was sustainable. So I think, that's a significant change. It changes people's income statements as they start to become less reliant on commercial office space. Not every sector, light industrial, where you depend on
Yeah,
face-to-face interviews and walk-in candidates and that sort of thing. You're still going to need to have bricks and mortar, but IT staffing or accounting and finance staffing, I think it's been proven now beyond shadow of a doubt that, the vast majority of your business can operate from disparate locations anywhere in the world, in fact, which opens up all kinds of interesting opportunities to reduce expenses in your business, not just in the way of commercial office space, but let's face it, if you're a staffing company in Northern California, you're paying a very handsome price for a recruiter in terms of a salary.
that's
But
right.
with a work from anywhere philosophy or methodology driving or underpinning your business, well, then you can have a recruiter that's in Alaska. You can have a recruiter that's in, Tennessee. And we've obviously seen offshore recruiting for a long time. Well, now you can do it near shore or onshore. But certainly at a much more affordable expense level for many. So I think work from home has been one. I think the candidate shortage as we've emerged from COVID, or as we continue to emerge from COVID, has been, a very interesting phenomena. I think, we have a large segment of the talent population that's just decided, I've made enough, I'm old enough, I'm going to retire early. It's, a lot of talk about the great resignation. I think to some extent it's the great retirement as well. So it's certainly had an impact on dynamic talent supply, and no doubt about it. And that forces operators to be more creative and more cutting edge in terms of their talent acquisition approaches. I think probably the third thing that we've seen accelerate through the last couple of years, it started pre-COVID, but that was the ongoing digital transformation of the business.
Yeah,
Some see these talent management platforms where the candidate can download an app on their phone and look at the jobs that the agency has and maybe even connect directly with the employer. Some will see that as a disintermediation play where the agency is being squeezed out of the equation. But, the advent of Monster and Career Builder in its day, when it first came around, had the same sort of impact. A lot of people thought, well, that's the end of the staffing industry. And it wasn't. Staffing companies and staffing people have learned to weaponize those tools to a very significant degree and use them to become even better at what they do. I think some of the talent management platforms that are out there now that are available for companies, staffing companies to adopt on a white label basis, give them one more arrow in the quiver in terms of how they service their candidate population, how they service their client population, because both are customers, and you've always got to be focusing on, how can we serve them better? How can we serve them in a way that they want to be served? How can we meet them where they are, so to speak? And I think the ongoing digital transformation push is very profound. Maybe one other thing too, I think and it ties in with the second point, the talent shortage, the need for upskilling, particularly in the low wage, low skill segments. If you're an operator in that space and you're experiencing churn, well, I think one of the sound strategies for reducing that churn is to start to legitimately give your candidates, your temporary workers, your contractors, a career path, a vision on a future, a way to learn some new skills, a way to get themselves up the escalator in terms of their pay grade and the work that they do and that sort of thing. I think that has always fallen on the shoulders of the traditional employer. I think it's probably high time that more and more staffing companies jump on board with that kind of thinking as well. What can we do to help these people have better futures? That's going to stabilize their talent pipeline, if nothing else.
I think those are some great points, and I agree with all those observations for how COVID or the pandemic has really changed this industry. it certainly accelerated that digital transformation. You know, we see everybody racing to do that. I feel my greatest fear with that, though, Brian, is that some agencies or operators will go too far with it, and they will try to over leverage technology, which will result in almost us commoditizing or dehumanizing ourselves. And you hit it right on the head that the candidate and the client are both customers, and you really need to have a strong kind of customer relationship plan to build those. And I think sometimes you look for automation to eke out the, you know, the nth percent of value or optimization or, you know, quantity, but you trade off a valuable touch point where you could be building a relationship with a candidate, you know, and or a client. And when that happens, I fear that if you don't have the strong relationships with your candidates, they're more likely to ghost you. They're more likely to abandon a job without saying anything to anybody because opportunities are plentiful. And then really, if you add that up over and over and over again, when you get all of the people that a staffing agency cycles throughout the year out in the marketplace, what are they saying? They're not talking about an amazing experience they had with your agency, you know. And I think that operators can run the risk if they go a little bit too far with leaning on technology for optimization. So I think it's a balance. I think there's going to be a little bit of a snapback, and hopefully we can, you know, maintain a strong human element, because that is really what allowed the staffing agencies to not be too disrupted by job boards. When everyone was running for the hills saying job boards are going to replace staffing agencies, and as you said, we learned to weaponize them, that's because there's human beings running these companies, and we learn how to bring it in as a tool to make us better. And if you get away from the human side of it too much, I fear that you could cause some harm to your agency.
No, I don't know what it's going to look like in 20 years, but certainly I would venture to say that it's definitely less than 50% of the candidates out there that want to have an all digital experience. And even a lower percentage of the clients, the employers out there that want to have an all digital experience. There's something that comes with accountability and being able to have the relationship and being able to feel like you have somebody who knows you and is concerned about what it is you are looking to accomplish, sort of on your side, facilitating the process. You know, that might seem old school to some. I don't think it's going anywhere fast. Maybe in 20 years it'll be different, but you know, we're not 20 years out yet. So I think finding a way to harmonize the way in which you offer a variety of options to your customer base, candidates and clients, so that they can choose how they want to deal with you, is the right answer.
I couldn't agree more. I think that is the right approach. So would you say, out of those 4 observations, would you say that accelerating the adoptance of technology and being a little bit more open-minded to change is maybe the greatest benefit that the pandemic did bring, or do you feel maybe that's something else?
Well, I think actually open-mindedness is probably the most important attribute that an owner can have. You know, if you, it's really easy, having been an owner myself, it's really easy to get caught drinking your own Kool-Aid and thinking that your way is the only way, or that your way is the best way. And as I said earlier, now I have an opportunity to meet with owners of all different sorts of companies every day who run their businesses just a little bit different or very much different from each other. And there are some great lessons to be learned outside of your own little existence. So I think having an open mind, keeping your eyes open, keeping your ears open, getting involved in an industry association, getting involved, you know, with your customers, having an advisory board in your company that's comprised of candidates and customers. I think these are all the sorts of things that predispose us to being able to be open-minded and take some of the inputs and put them to work. You know, you've mentioned to me before that, you know, even in your role with staffing now, that you have an opportunity to learn things and bring them back to your own business and apply them to everybody's benefit. So I think really that's probably the number one, that's probably the number one benefit that's come from COVID. I think, you know, a few other things, certainly, you know, we've all seen and heard stories where employees through COVID, many of them felt marginalized, and many of them felt like they didn't have a safety net. And many of them came to clearly and abundantly realize their employer, whether it's a traditional employer or a staffing company that's employing them, didn't care. So I think, there's been a polarizing effect in the marketplace, which is good for those that are on the right side of the equation. Those that are getting great reviews in Glassdoor, those that are creating great candidate experiences, those that are upskilling, those that are offering different ways for people to work with them and engage with them. I think they're getting the better reviews on Google and the better reviews in Glassdoor, and are likely better positioned to move forward. Those that churn and burn, as it, no problem, candidate didn't show up today, I'll have another one out there in 3 hours. That's just sticking a Band-Aid on a problem that's not going to go away. So I think, shedding some light on good operators versus not good operators has been, I think, in a strange sort of way, probably really beneficial. And I think the other thing too for owners, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the work from anywhere, work from home thing. As an industry, we've always concentrated on measuring the productivity of our own internal recruiters and salespeople with KPIs. It's all about activities. It's all about crossing T's and dotting I's and making calls and making connects and submissions and whatnot. I think, when all of a sudden managers and owners have had to learn to manage and support people who aren't physically near them anymore, I think it's starting to shift the focus away from activities and KPIs more towards outputs and outcomes, which I think is a healthy thing for us. It definitely puts us out of our comfort zone. I managed my KPIs for years, not only my own practice, but the practice of, at one point, 109 people in our organization. So there's probably still some value in that, but the shift is underway. And I think some owners are starting to realize, as long as you're behaving ethically and honestly, I don't care how you get your results, just get your results. And that certainly represents, I think, a shift that probably COVID has had something to do with, as far as an acceleration factor is concerned.
I got to say, I think that's fascinating, because I am KPI guy. I like that. However, I'm a bit contrarian, where I don't truly like KPIs down to the micro level, just because I understand that the people that work at the ground level in a staffing agency, they're dealing with human beings, right? They are the most variable element of any process. So it is really hard to, KPIs are very easy to use if you're just, producing widgets. If you're really Six Sigma and you're just trying to get every ounce of variability out of your process, the KPIs can be fantastic at a micro level, but I do like macro level KPIs that at least, and I equate it to just, lights on a dashboard of a car. If your check engine light comes on or your tire pressure light comes on, hey, that's just going to give me a clue of where to look. And that's where my philosophy stops, and to say, hey, okay, I see there might be something going on with the business. Now it's time to go have a conversation with a human and just say, hey, help me understand. What are you seeing that I'm not seeing, or why are we seeing something different, and what can we do to solve this together? And that's the balance that I've struck with it. But I think you're right. It really does come down to, outputs. How did we get the job done? I like that balance.
As an owner, you can look back 20 years and say, wow, we really struggled when we first started to introduce flex hours. That started to challenge this. You've got to be in the office mentality. You've got to hit your KPIs. You've got to hit your activities. That started to shift our focus towards more of, well, are you getting your job done? What are the outputs and the outcomes that you're experiencing? Now, today, we're dealing with companies that are having to consider moving to a 4-day work week. We're dealing with companies that are starting to come forward and saying, choose your own amount of vacation. We don't care. Just get your job done. And that behooves the owner and the management team then to make it abundantly clear what the goals are, what the expected outputs and outcomes need to be in order for somebody to be considered successful. That's a big change, and it's not going to come easy, but I think it's a change that we can't prevent from overtaking us at some point in time.
No, I like it. I would say it's a welcome change, because I think for me, when you sort of shift to that mindset, you open the door for new ideas and new methodologies to accomplish a task successfully, which is really, has always been the greatest benefit that the new next generation brings to an industry. You know, as much as the boomers and the Gen Xers always wanted to bag on the millennials and the, you know, the Gen, you know, Y and Z and whatnot, the reality is they grew up in a world that was largely built by the generations before them, and they've had to learn how to optimize and navigate it differently, and they've got new creative ideas. And I think if you focus on, hey, what are the outputs, you know, and how are you performing with this, you're opening that door to invite those ideas in to make you an innovative company versus, hey, our KPIs say that you need to be interviewing 25 people a day, and if you don't interview 25 people a day, we're not going to be successful. That's not always going to hold true, you know. So I like that shift. I think that's a great observation. You mentioned something else that I thought was interesting that I wanna ask about. You highlighted your vantage point. You say you get to work with all these different companies and you see these neat ways that they're doing things. Is there any one thing that sticks out in your mind? Is there something that you're like, this was something cool that this agency was doing that I thought was really interesting? Is there anything that like you can recall just kind of off the top of your head right now that you could share?
Well, you know, certainly I think the one area that is a brave new frontier and an absolutely essential ingredient for long-term success in the future is the whole issue revolving around upskilling your employees. It's a different, you know, it's a different mindset that drives that. It's, you know, employee temps and contractors in particular have often been commoditized in the minds of the owners of staffing companies. Those are the square pegs that go in the square holes. And if that one doesn't work out, or when that one retires or leaves for another job, we'll just find another square peg and stick it in the hole. I think clearly the talent shortages, again, accelerating the need for us to look at ways to be more cognizant of the needs of our workers. You know, these are people who, through COVID, we saw they want sick pay. They want a safety net. They also, particularly in the low wage and low skill set, are looking for something that will get them to that next step up on the ladder, which on their own they just may not have the time or the ability to find. So I think there's a great opportunity for us in the staffing industry to start to work with all of our workers to create a self-propelling roadmap, if you will, that gets people on a learning journey, giving them new skills, whether they be life skills, how to balance your checkbook, or actual new practical hands-on skills that they can use in whatever job it is they're doing. I think that's absolutely essential, and I think probably one of the most exciting opportunities we have in front of us as far as the staffing industry is concerned. Not a lot are doing it yet. There are a few, and I think the spoils will definitely go disproportionately to those that get on board with that sooner, as opposed to those that jump on after the fact. So for me, I think that's probably one of the most significant changes that we face going forward. The digital transformation that we have only helps to facilitate that even better. You know, this doesn't mean that you have to have teachers on your staff and trainers and course designers, and you know, technology can be used to a great extent to deliver this stuff in such a way that your workers can, as I said earlier, self-propel, so they can drive themselves through a learning process and be mindful of you know, the fact that you were the one that gave them that opportunity. I think just ticks a lot of different boxes that we need to be concerned about going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too. And I've actually now come across a couple of companies that are actually starting to have, you know, like learning modules. You know, I've seen one company that went all in with like financial literacy for their staff to basically say, hey, we understand the socioeconomic, you know, group of people that we're placing, and we want to teach them how to leverage this opportunity that they have to lift themselves out of poverty. And I thought that was pretty altruistic. And I've seen other ones that are focused in niche industries. They're sort of newer upstart industries, you know, like the cannabis and hemp industry that's sort of, you know, it's sort of evolving, you know, and it's going to need a massive influx of workers in a lot of different positions. And those are workers that just didn't exist prior, and they're going to need to be trained, you know. So I saw an agency on the forefront of that had a pretty interesting learning module library where people could go in and learn new skills and learn about the industry and really position themselves as experts. And then they even taught the people, or I guess share them like, hey, if you complete these modules, you're going to be more marketable for some of our other opportunities. And it did exactly what you mentioned. It really helped them kind of see that career path. And the nice thing is employees are going to jump from company to company. And if you're an agency that can help them kind of jump up the ladder all within your clientele, that's going to add value to your clients and actually retain that value within your company. I think that's a pretty good astute observation for where the industry is headed, man. I like that.
Thanks. I think, Dan, there's one other challenge, which then equates to an opportunity for us as well, and it has to do with the convergence of the gig economy. We've seen a lot of defections from the conventional workforce economy over to this gig economy, and I think one of the driving reasons, at least anecdotally, is the fact that not everybody wants to work a 40-hour, 5-day a week work week.
Right.
Some people work Monday and Tuesday this week, Thursday and Friday next week, nothing the following week. They want some flexibility. And I think that can translate in many staffing sectors, not all, but in many staffing sectors, to us as operators becoming more adept at dynamic scheduling and job sharing, so that I actually have my temp worker Bob fill the job on Monday and Tuesday. Betty's going to fill it on Wednesday and Thursday. Fred's going to fill it on Friday, and then maybe even a different combination of people the following week, and so on. That is really coloring outside the lines for a lot of owners. A lot of people are still stuck in the 37 and a half, 9 to 5, 40-hour, 5-day a week. You get X number of holidays, and that just doesn't work. And when you've got a severe talent shortage, you've got to be creative in terms of, how are you going to get the workers that you need? Well, guess what? Some of them are driving Uber and working for TaskRabbit and doing DoorDash and
Absolutely.
And selling their wares on Fiverr and other things. Well, maybe there's a way to blend some of them into your workforce as well. So I think that's a major challenge. But I think, again, for those operators that are prepared to take that head on and look for ways to integrate more flexibility in their scheduling of workers going forward, I think they will end up being the ones to enjoy the spoils from that.
I couldn't agree more. And I speak to, company executives, and I speak to HR groups about, the workforce and the constraints around recruiting right now. And, they're like, well, where is all this talent? Like, unemployment is really low. Like, why are there so many, open jobs? Like, we don't understand. And it's like, there's this amazing subset. If you just take the entire pie of the workforce, there's a smaller pie that just literally shifted to the left over to the gig economy. And that's a shift that's got momentum. It's not going to stop. And as you said, those people are taking up these gigs that fit into their life. They're piecing their work together that fit their lifestyle. And what's really fascinating to me is it's not very hard to replace $15, $16, $17 an hour. It's pretty reasonably easy to do with Uber and DoorDash and Amazon delivery, all these different things that you can do. And that's part of it. And I've lobbied for the last year to say companies need to be looking at the technology to bring sort of that gig placement to their own agency. So I think that you're our prognosticator there. That one is going to happen in our industry, and people are going to say, oh, it's going to disrupt the staffing industry, but it's the ones that leverage it that are going to be the leaders of the kind of the next wave of innovators of staffing. And I do have one last burning question that I want to ask for our audience, because you obviously have a lot of experience in M&A. I know that you represent on the sell side, so I want to focus it right to this. If there is an agency owner out there that is contemplating selling right now, if they're like, it's on the horizon for whatever reason, maybe it's in that 1 to 3 year window, they're thinking about selling their agency. If you could talk to them just for a moment and say, these are the things that you should be thinking about to really optimize the value of your agency and make sure you have a successful sale, what would you tell that person?
Probably the first and most important thing, which captures a lot of the subsets, would be, get a valuation. You don't have to pay for it necessarily. We do a back of the envelope valuation to give somebody a sense of where we think their business stands in the marketplace if it were to go to market today. But, being a staffing person too, I can't help but say, but here's some things that you could start doing or stop doing that are going to, change your valuation over the course of the next 6 to 18 months, the short to midterm. So I think getting some sense of where you are on that roadmap right now is a good starting point. I think it's also, that will then drive some subsets. It will force you to get to know your numbers if you don't know them already, or know them better if you don't know them that well. Understand how they work. Knowing your math, knowing the numbers of your business is not only absolutely critical in terms of being able to go to market, but it's also critical in terms of running your business, at least from my experience. That also leads into making sure that you are keeping good records, that you go through a house cleaning, and if you're not doing things that you need to be, start doing them, and if you're doing things that you shouldn't be, stop doing them. As far as record keeping is concerned, that's a key ingredient. A lot of deals or a lot of transactions break down in due diligence because either there's a lack of record keeping, or records are found that don't necessarily reinforce what's being represented on the surface. So knowing your numbers, getting your records cleaned up. I would say, also for owners, building leverage within your organization. Particularly, we've got 19,000 staffing companies in the United States. The vast majority are small companies. And the vast majority of those small companies, the owner is intrinsic in the business. Maybe they're the chief rainmaker, that's the person who's going and getting most of the new clients, or, who knows, but they're likely doing something quite critical in the business. And if part of a transaction involves on their wish list being able to leave, then they've got to have a team of people that can run the business in their absence. So I think, establishing a core group of employees that can run the business for you is absolutely essential. Whether you're looking to, sell in 6 months, or whether you're looking to sell in 6 years, that's a really important piece as far as the kind of a deal that you're going to get and how easily you're going to be able to get your money off the table and actually get out. If you're intrinsic in the business, chances are a good chunk of your transaction is going to live in an earnout, and that's probably going to entice you to want to stay involved in the business after you've sold it and until your earnout is achieved or not achieved. That can certainly be reduced, if not eliminated, if you have a solid management team in place. And I think the other thing these days too, just with rising interest rates and some potential for a recession, I think conserving cash is, this is a good time to be conserving cash. There are smart purchases that you need to be making, but there's things that you need to not be bothering with at this point in time. Cash is important, keeping a good balance sheet, having a buffer, because you never know when the next COVID event, might not be a pandemic, but we should now be ready for anything, really. And cash will get you through a lot of things. So, don't spend every dollar you make. And a lot of us in the staffing industry have suffered from that for a long time. We live to the ends of our means. I think it's important to be fiscally conservative with your business finances these days. And if for no other reason, because interest rates are poised to continue to go up.
They are. And I have to affirm what you said. I've been on the buy side multiple times, and more times than I can even count in the LOI due diligence phase. And if I'm talking to an owner that doesn't seem to understand their business or the numbers, I get squeamish. I get nervous. It makes me wonder, how well is this operation really run? And it could be an amazing organization, but if they don't really know their numbers and they can't connect the dots with the story, it makes me a little bit nervous, going into it. And then if I get into due diligence and things are a little bit wonkier, they're not buttoned up, it makes me feel like the squeamishness or the nervousness that I was sensing on the front end is validated, and it puts a lot of pause into how much risk am I willing to take on? And I sort of devalue the business a little bit for my model, and I'm willing to put less cash up front at close, and it works against them. So those are really, I think those are 2 points for any seller out there that just, work with a consultant or advisor that can help you understand your numbers really well if that's not your strong suit. And it might not be, and that's okay, but get strong enough at it to be able to tell the story of your agency through the numbers and the data, because most buyers are going to look at that and, make sure that what you say during those early conversations will tie out to what they're going to find in due diligence. And if that happens, the security and the value of your business is going to go up in the buyer's eyes, and they're going to feel confident, putting more cash up front or having more secure, financials on the back end. So I think that's a great point to share. Brian, if there's any companies out there that are looking to get a valuation just to see what their company is worth right now, or maybe they're looking for some advice or guidance on how to buy a company, maybe there's something that you currently represent that might be a fit for them and they want to get on kind of your buyer list to be marketed to, or if they're saying, hey, I'm actually been thinking about selling and I feel like it might be a good time. I feel like it's still a bit of a seller's market in staffing. If they want to get a hold of you, what is the best way for them to reach you?
Well, I'm not a big social media guy, but I am certainly on LinkedIn all the time, and we have a resource-rich website with lots of good, I think, some good material in there for people that want to learn more about buying or selling and what they potentially need to be doing with their companies. My contact information is in there, my email, my telephone number. As I say, we do these back of the envelope, these informal valuations. In fact, we probably do a couple of hundred of those every year. It's a bit of a pay it forward mindset that was established by Bob Cohen in '91. We do have a heart for the operator because we've been there ourselves. Sam, my colleague, he's been here 18 years. But prior to that, he was the president of the American Staffing Association for 15 years. So like I said, we don't know much about anything other than staffing. And we're happy to have a no obligation conversation with an owner under an NDA to help them understand at least what we think their business is worth. Some people get mad when they hear our answers as well. We value conservatively. We don't want to promise you the moon if that's not likely to happen. So, getting some sense of where you stand today and what you need to do to get to where you want to be, I think it starts with that. So, feel free to reach out to me through our website, phone, email, LinkedIn, whatever, and start a conversation.
That's awesome, man. I will make sure that we get all of the links to your contact information and website listed in this article here right next to the video. So anyone that's watching this that wants to connect with Brian, please go do that. He is an amazing, amazing resource. I will give him, an incredible endorsement. I've really thoroughly enjoyed working with him on multiple levels, successful acquisitions. I know 100% of the time, if I go to him and he's representing a company, that it's legit, that the opportunity is sound, it's a good business, it's been advised well, and I've got zero concerns on recommending Brian to be an advisor in this industry. So, man, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for you dispelling some wisdom to our followers in the staffing industry, and just I wish you well, and I hope you keep doing what you're doing, man.
Pleasure was mine, Dan. Thanks so much. Now I'm going to have a hard time living up to 3/4 of what you just said about me, but I appreciate our relationship, and thanks for the opportunity to be here and hopefully share something that helps somebody.